You are Locked On Wolverines, your daily podcast on the Michigan Wolverines, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.
Happy Wednesday. We are back and doing it. Locked On Wolverines podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team every day. I am your man on the ground as a whole publisher of Wolverines Wire through USA Today Sports Media Group. And we have a lot to try to parse through today. I don't really know how we're going to do it because we spoke to Jim Harbaugh today, Wednesday, mid to late afternoon, 4 hours ago, fall camp update. Now, while it's kind of a weird duality here in that there's a lot and there's also not a lot. So it's kind of an interesting situation because I left being like, I don't know what I'm supposed to write about. I do not know. I don't think there's really anything here. And turns out I wrote 5 things. There's a 5th thing that I probably am going to write tomorrow, just kind of saving it. But I don't, there ended up being a bit more than I thought, but it was kind of a weird situation where normally in fall camp, we do get kind of more of a, this player is really doing well. This player is really doing well. We didn't really get that, which kind of was an odd situation because it's kind of like, okay, what are we doing here? Because if you're not going to update us on how the players are doing, then what are we talking about? You know what I mean? So we were kind of stonewalled when it came to that, but we did still get a little bit of intel. I think the big thing, obviously, is the quarterback battle. He was asked, I think, 4 questions about the quarterbacks of the 12 or so that he got. And I think that is, and Zuri's licking my leg right now. That makes for a really fun time. For those of you on video wondering why my face just went a little bit weird. I think that the thing is, it's an interesting scenario, obviously, with the Cade McNamara, JJ McCarthy thing, because no one really knows how it's going to play out. Everyone has a guess. I think the consensus is people think that Cade's going to start the season, JJ's going to finish it. I think that some people thought that last year. I remember my conversation, which was exclusive here to Locked On Wolverines, Joel Klatt, in the week of the Michigan State game. He said that that's kind of how he saw things going even then in the middle of the season. I mean, that was going into Halloween weekend. And he still thought that, yeah, JJ McCarthy is going to take over by the time this thing is said and done. Didn't end up going that way. But Jim Harbaugh insists these guys are neck and neck, right? That they are both starting caliber quarterbacks. And he's like, hey, you don't just have to listen to me. Go ask the BTN guys who are here today to watch practice. Go ask Howard Griffith, Gerry DiNardo, Dave Revson, like that. Ask those guys. They saw it. They're even. So when it came to that, then it turned into a situation of, well, when do you want to have a starter? And it's like, well, when one emerges. That could happen in fall camp. That could happen during the season. Which leads, obviously, to the next thing is, will Michigan have another Tom Brady, Drew Henson scenario on its hands? To which he kind of derided the idea of if you have 2 quarterbacks, you have none. And I was talking to a colleague afterwards, and he's like, where did he even come up with that? No one's talking about that. No one said that. Well, yes. I think Harbaugh saw RJ Young leaving Michigan out of his top 25 and his subsequent explanation as to why he didn't, which, I mean, it was all very stupid. And actually, when he started to explain himself, it started to almost like make sense to me. Like, okay, I get that. Like, oh, don't have the Broyles Award winner, in Josh Gaddis anymore, replacing Mike McDonald. Okay, fair. He backed that up with some really stupid stuff, kind of like, Sharon Moore. I understand he has not been an offensive coordinator, but then you're like, and then Matt Weiss, we don't really know, comes from the Baltimore Ravens. I talked about this yesterday, but I think it's stupid when people look at like an NFL coach in college and is like, probably pretty dumb. Dude, should go the other way around, right? College position coach going to the NFL, maybe a little bit of reason for consternation, not vice versa. But and then he brought up Jesse Minter. Minter comes aboard from Vanderbilt completely, and he gave a cursory mention to Baltimore Ravens, but it's like going and being the Vanderbilt defensive coordinator ends up being a stain on you, like no matter what, But one of the other things that RJ Young had kind of said was, that if you have two quarterbacks, you have none. Listen, I'm old enough to remember in 2018, I remember driving home from Notre Dame. It was the next day. It was a night game, so I stayed in Benton Harbor. Detail y'all don't really need, but whatever. I remember driving home from that game and listening to the Sirius XM to their Sunday show, and Tom Luganbill and Barrett Sallee were just so ecstatic about the fact that Alabama and Clemson both had two quarterbacks that could start, right? You had the Jalen Hurts Tua Tagovailoa situation coming out of the national championship game from the year before, and then you also had Kelly Bryant and Trevor Lawrence, and they're just like, oh, this is so good. Now college football. I remember this being said. Now in college football, if you don't have two quarterbacks, you don't have any. Well, it ended up being those two teams settled on one eventually, and I'm sure that Michigan will figure something out, whether it's that or they might just have different packages for them, the same way that we've seen that any team use wide receivers, running backs, offensive weapons, anything like that. So there's a chance that ends up playing into the season. Michigan has an embarrassment of riches, and it's a quality problem to have at the quarterback position. At least now, it's not a situation where it's like, well, they don't have it, they have one guy that's okay and a bunch of guys that are whatever. They currently have two starting quarterback caliber signal callers on the team. So they're going to have to figure that out, obviously. But it's going to be I don't want to say a challenge, because they can do kind of whatever they want. Or at least they should. Those first 3-4 games offensively. Then it's going to get real against Iowa. But you know what? We've seen some smart things from the Michigan coaches from time to time. They could be real smart and really get creative with the way that they use the two. More so than last year, which was mostly a positive situation, except for in the MSU game, really. All right, so we've got more to talk about. Before we do, of course, you're hanging out with some friends and putting back a few drinks. A few becomes too many. As the evening comes to an end and people start to head out, you think of calling for a ride. Nah, you know what? You live nearby. You can make it home okay. It's no big deal. What are the odds you'll get pulled over anyway? And even so, what's the worst that could happen? Your insurance goes up, you lose your license, you lose your job, you total your car, you kill someone. Everyone knows about the risks of driving drunk. The results are tragic and often deadly. However, that still doesn't stop everyone from getting behind the wheel while under the influence. That's why police officers are out there right now looking for impaired drivers on our roads to save lives. If you think you're okay to drive after a few drinks, then think again, play it safe, and plan ahead to get a ride. It only takes one mistake to change your life or someone else's forever. Drive sober or get pulled over. All right, we've got a really excited little puppy here that just really wants to get involved. I haven't been with her for the majority of the day. Went and ran errands before. So I'm sharing and then we had the press conference. So I'm sharing the attention that I should be giving wholly to you with her, because she's just literally sitting here trying to be a cat. Anyway. So there's a lot more that got discussed, of course. The quarterback position obviously being the big one. Equally as important, and go ahead, find all the wood you can, knock on it, cross your fingers, do everything you can, but Michigan is fully healthy at the moment. 2 weeks into fall camp, 2.5 weeks until the season opener, no season-ending injuries at this point. Now, that can come in a hurry. That can come in any practice. That could come in any game. We saw that obviously with Ronnie Bell. So, knock on all of the wood. I didn't estimate how much knocking on wood would get Zuri's attention here. But yeah, that's huge news. So, because normally by this point in fall camp, there's usually one or two people that Jim Harbaugh is like, well, all right, this guy's going to be out and this guy's going to be out. Usually it's not like a giant name, but sometimes it's been, right? A couple of years ago, it was Andrew Stueber. And that's what propelled Jalen Mayfield. It was supposed to be like this big battle for right tackle. Jalen Mayfield and Andrew Stueber going into 2019, but nope. And I think that's good news also knowing that Jaden McBurrows still isn't out for the season, right? Because it seems like he's maybe at a setback, that you were not going to see him right away this year, but it sounds like we'll see him again eventually here this year. So that's good. So the weird thing about Jim Harbaugh being kind of reticent about mentioning names was I asked him about Kenneth Grant and Mason Graham, knowing that I used to be the person that would ask the freshman question. I did it. I started doing it in fall camp in 2016. That was the first time I started covering fall camp. Of course, 2015, they didn't have press conferences in fall camp. The whole submarine thing. But so I started covering the program in complete fullness in 2016. That was my first year with 24/7 Sports. And I asked him the freshman question then in fall camp. I'm pretty sure. If not, yeah, I'm pretty sure I did. I definitely asked him in 2017 and scared me to death because he did this. I said, last year you said Chris Evans was a guy you expected to break out. Who do you think could be that guy this year? And he goes, Did I say Chris Evans? And he just looked, it was like, I thought he was about to tear me to shreds. Like, oh, he didn't say it. He didn't say it. And I'm putting words in his mouth. And he goes, I was right. I still watch that video on my phone every now and again to kind of remind me of how far I've come and whatever. But I asked him that question almost every year. And then I think it was like 2018, he didn't answer it. In 2019, he did. Then the last couple years, he hasn't really answered it. So I kind of knew like he's back to the whole, well, don't want to say, because they leave one person out, blah, blah, blah. So I didn't go that route this year. This year I decided I was going to ask very specifically about those two players because obviously we all think that Kenneth Grant is that player that mystery freshman he was discussing. But there's also rumblings that Mason Graham is still just moving up, being even better than what we saw in the spring game. He said all of like 2 sentences when I asked him. He was like, yeah, they've been good. I'm like, oh, great. Cool. Thanks, man. But he said like, they'll both play. But then I asked him more about Kenneth Grant. I was like, coming in the biggest, I didn't really have a good question. I just wanted him to talk more. I just kind of Michael Scotted my way through it. I'm like, Kenneth Grant, biggest player on the team. How, why, when, which? And he's like, all right, I'll tell you a little bit something more. And he's like, he moves of a guy who weighs 100 pounds less than what he does. That's what makes him so freaky. And I mean that on the football field, y'all. So it got a little something there, right? So that's good. So those were my 2 questions. Health of the team. I think that's 2.5 questions that I asked him this year, fall camp. Last year, I kept on asking him. I'm going to share with you a little joke that I've had inside. Let's see if I can do it where it does it justice. And y'all can participate if you want in this joke that me and my best friend still currently have. Because it was so perplexing a year ago that I called my best friend immediately and told him that this was what happened. So I had asked him 2 questions I'm pretty sure neither of which had anything to do with the offensive line. Actually, I'm pretty sure I asked him a variation of the freshman question, but I think it wasn't necessarily the freshman as much as just who on the team. Memory serves, it was who on the team is really taking the biggest step forward from last year to this year. And he ended up answering the question by just running through the names of the offensive line. I guarantee that every one of you that is watching this video has at some point watched a Jim Harbaugh press conference video, and you know how he'll just at times run through the names, right? He was just like, well, and he just literally runs through the names. So then I was like, all right, I didn't get what I wanted there. So in that explanation, Carson Barnhart, he had said, had made maybe some of the biggest strides of anyone in camp. So the second time I got a chance to ask him a question last year, I said, okay, you said Carson Barnhart made some of the biggest strides of anyone in camp. Who else in camp? Across the whole team. I know I clarified. I remember I clarified. Across the whole team has made that type of impression. And what did he do? He ran through the offensive line guys again. So I was driving home, and my best friend was like, he just seems to think that you just love the offensive line. Like you were just like, no matter what question you're going to ask, he's going to be like, hey, so how's Donovan Edwards looking? It's his first fall camp. Like Jim Harbaugh being like, this guy, you knew this guy was going to ask an offensive line question. And then all the other media people being like, oh, yeah, he's like that. So that's one of my favorite little inside my head jokes that goes off all the time. Sometimes when I'm asking a question, because I've made it a point to ask him at least one question every press conference. Maybe not in the post game, but in the traditional Monday press conference or whatever. Sometimes I start laughing to myself because I'm like, what if he answers this with an offensive line question? All right. Anyway, speaking of offensive line, big segue. It's actually into the defensive line, because in part of the Kenneth Grant thing, he was like, I'm glad you brought that up, because the interior defensive line has been incredible. It's like you're seeing the progress happening. Not just Mozzie Smith. It's all these guys. Mike Elston's doing an incredible job. But what you're starting to see is they're starting to win battles against what is thought to be one of, if not the best offensive line in the country. They're starting to win those battles. Very tantalizing, because if it is an iron sharpens iron situation, my predictions of Michigan's defense being really, really good sound like it's on track to that being true. So it'll be interesting to see. All right, I've got a couple more things I want to talk about from the Harbaugh press conference. I also want to address Gerry DiNardo from BTN's comments. But before we move on and do that, BetOnline.net is the fastest and easiest way to check in on all of your betting needs. Find all your favorite sports and events at the #1 online source for odds, lines, and games. Find reviews and news of every league, including Major League Baseball, NFL, NBA, NHL, combat sports, esports, and even golf. BetOnline continues to be the top online resource for all your sports wagering information, from live in-game betting, scores, and podcasts. They have you covered. Head to the BetOnline, okay? BetOnline today, or use your mobile device to learn more about the action happening today. BetOnline, when the game starts. I just realized I said when the game starts. Where the game starts. Too hot out today. All right, I put the call for mailbag questions up on Twitter a little late. I forgot it was Wednesday. We're not into like a structured week yet. So I'm going to have a little bit of trouble about what day is which. There's other reasons that I have where things are a little topsy-turvy. I'm not going to get into it as far as like understanding what day is what. Generally just discombobulated over here is basically what I'm saying. But, all right, I'm just going to touch real fast on some of the other things because I want to get into the Gerry DiNardo stuff here in a moment. But Harbaugh was asked about the Ron Bellamy comments about Andrell Anthony and Braylon Edwards. Now, going back and reading what Bellamy said, it wasn't like, oh yeah, he's definitely Braylon Edwards. It was more like that's who he strives to be. So he's kind of working to emulate that. Okay, cool. But Harbaugh says, like, you know what? That's a pretty darn good comparison right there. I think that's verbatim. So that's pretty big if he can be that type of player. I mean, he's wearing the number 1. So if you're going to wear the number 1 as a wide receiver, you better be that. No offense to Kakoa Crawford, but that ain't it, man. If you're going to wear number 1 as a wide receiver, you better be that, right? Just like if you wear number 2 as a cornerback, you better know what you're getting yourself into. Because people ain't going to remember you unless you do something with it. So, I think that's interesting. We'll see how that plays out. Michigan has way too many receivers. I mean, I think we counted to 10 yesterday. Because I'm going to keep Mike Sainristil over there real quick. We got Sainristil, Cornelius, Roman Wilson, AJ Henning, Andrell Anthony, Christian Dixon, who I've been seeing more and more stuff in the camp video and pictures that have been posted lately. 3 freshmen. So that's 9. And Ronnie Bell. 10. So it's going to be hard to be really, truly breakout unless Michigan decides it's going to go all LSU 2019, which it very well might. That leads me to just a particular curiosity. How many receivers did LSU have that year that had 500 yards or more receiving? I got to know. They only had 4, but they had, and one of them was a tight end. But Jamar Chase had 1780. Justin Jefferson had 1540. Terrence Marshall had 671. So it's going to be hard for a guy. I mean, they had 6,024 passing yards that year. But, I mean, if you split that production, I mean, you could have 500, 6, 7, 8 times. But, I mean, you still have Donovan Edwards, Blake Corum, Eric All, Luke Schoonmaker, any other tight end that might want to get involved. It's going to be hard, man. There's going to be limited balls to go around. So I don't know how that's going to work. All right. We have covered pretty much everything. CJ Stokes was the other one. I'm not going to really get into that. But let's talk this Gerry DiNardo stuff here real quick. I want to, just for clarity, for all of that, let's pull up exactly what Gerry DiNardo said, because I think that's important. This is not going to make it easy here. All right, so here's what he said about Michigan. And I'm not seeing, obviously, I'm not watching, I think, what's currently airing of their series here with them being at practice fall camp. But he says, BTN bus tour stop 12, Michigan, really confident team, talented young players helping with depth, could be headed into another 10-year war type of competition with their rival. Don't see either program dominating the series. Now, that was actually his second tweet. I accidentally scrolled down too far. So that's huge when it comes to Ohio State. But here's the first thing he said. Michigan's really impressive practice in every way, coaching, tempo, talent, and energy. Championship caliber team again. Now that flies in the face kind of this, especially like the Ohio State reference there, the 10-year war. Kind of flies in the face of this Ohio State's going to win running away type mode that everyone's kind of in. I think Ohio State's going to be really good. I don't think that they're impenetrable. I don't. Now, I could be proven wrong. I was proven wrong when I said the exact same thing going into 2018. Turned out to be very false, right? Thankfully, I didn't have the podcast at that point. But I did not think that they were anything to really write home about in 2018 going into that year. Granted, they were kind of just whatever for most of the year. So I don't know exactly what we're going to get from the Buckeyes because, yeah, their offense can be really good, but they've got a lot of unproven talent. Michigan's got a lot of proven talent. On offense, for sure. Defensively, I've got a lot of faith in what Michigan's able to do. Gerry DiNardo, actually, when he visited Ohio State, not so much. He said, BTN bus tour stop 7, Ohio State. New defensive schemes always take time to get ready, and this one won't be any different. That's kind of what I'm predicting. Now, again, I've been made a fool of before. I'm not ruling out being made a fool of again here. But there's certainly a chance for the Wolverines to have a really good defense, and Ohio State to still kind of have a defense that looks different but performs about the same. It might take a couple of years, but generally it takes defenses a lot quicker to come together than it does offenses. I guess it depends on the players you have in the defense and the person teaching it and all of that. And you know what? If it doesn't come together for Ohio State, Ryan Day's the one who went out there and said, 11-2 is unacceptable for us in Columbus. Yeah, man, might be. You might be out of a job if you go 11-2 if one of those losses is to Michigan. Just how it goes. So we'll see how that plays out. But I think that's interesting. I know some will point out Gerry is tended to be really optimistic about Michigan. I don't think that's wrong. I mean, Michigan's tended to be at worst the second most talented team as far as pure talent. I think it comes down to how it's deployed, right? Like, of course, the practice is going to look good. Michigan gets more talent than any other team that's not named Ohio State in the conference, generally. Even in the Rich Rod years, it was still a lot of talent. Just wasn't necessarily being deployed very well. So I still think that there's a lot to take away from this with the Gerry DiNardo thing. I'm excited to see if that comes to fruition. But it's I like that he's not sitting there bowing down to Ohio State. I'm kind of curious about two things. What were the responses to that? Well, that's not really telling me anything. Okay, doesn't look like there was any responses to that. Gerry does not seem to get a lot of Twitter engagement. To the Ohio State one, that is. The Michigan one, there's quite a few. Okay, here we go. All due respect, Gerry. You were completely off base here. Check the stars amongst both teams, recent recruits, direct correlation between getting blue chippers and success in the CFP and the two programs, and close. OSU by landslide. Stars matter a lot. That's fun. So upset. I might not be like a normal type of fan in the sense that I don't like actively root for Michigan anymore. And I haven't really since after the game in 2016. Again, I'm not saying I don't want Michigan to win. I'm not rooting really for one thing or the other. I'm rooting for... Now I am kind of rooting for the guys in the sense of like, I know these players, you want the best for them. But I'm not like, if Michigan wins, it's like, cool, they won. Michigan loses, like, oh, okay, they lost. It's kind of the nature of being able to try to do my job effectively. But I root against Ohio State as kind of like, who do I root for? Well, watch Ohio State when I can and root against them because I'm used to doing that. So it's just kind of delicious when that's the case. But here's the funny thing. I know guys that are on Ohio State's team, and I think a lot of their guys tend to be pretty good guys. Now, I don't think I know anyone right now, but I've known like a good 5-10 people on their team at a time. I know one for sure right now. Maybe two. But yeah, I don't know. It's just funny. All right. Anyway, that's going to do it for us today. Make sure you get your mailbag question in. On Twitter. I don't know why I'm prolonging this. All right, we'll talk to you again soon. Thanks for watching and or listening. Peace.